Provincial leaders are going to sit down with Prime Minister Justin Trudeau and several members of his cabinet today as they discuss Donald Trump's potential tariffs.
The incoming U.S. president says he will impose 25% tariffs on all imports from Canada and Mexico following his inauguration next Monday. While some recommendations on the Canadian side have included embargoes on electricity and minerals, Alberta Premier Danielle Smith argues against retaliation, saying it would only harm other provinces.
So let's talk more about the tariffs and the possible impact here. Let's talk to Dan Kelly live this morning. He's the president and CEO of the Canadian Federation of Independent Businesses. Dan, really appreciate your time this morning. So the Premier's gathering in Ottawa with some cabinet ministers. What is your main message you want to deliver to them on behalf of CFIB?
Well, look, our key message is that this isn't going to just bite big companies, large exporters, but tariffs will affect fundamentally small and medium-sized Canadian businesses. Over 2/3 of small businesses said that they will be affected very, very much directly by either the U.S. tariffs or any retaliatory tariffs imposed by Canada. And we need some leadership here. We can't just depend on a few premiers traveling around. We need the federal government to step up and put together a plan to try to help us address this.
Okay, so let's pick up on that leadership issue there. It sounds like you're not extremely confident, perhaps, in how the federal government has approached it so far. What would you put your confidence level at this point?
Yeah, it's pretty darn low. I mean, we don't have an effectively operating functional federal government at this moment. That's how serious this is. An election with some clarity about where we're going would certainly be of help, but the next best thing is to make this issue job one. I'm glad that the Prime Minister and the Premiers are meeting, but my goodness, we've got a series of Premiers going down to the United States trying to do some bit of the federal government's work in establishing stronger trade relationships and reminding the U.S. government of just how critical this would bite not just to Canadian companies, but to U.S. companies too. And that message I don't think is getting through, given that we don't have a government that is, we don't have political clarity at the federal level right now.
Yeah, and that looks like it won't be coming for a couple of months then, Dan. And yesterday, Ontario Premier Doug Ford said that this could, be between 450, maybe 500,000 job losses if the tariffs Donald Trump is promising do come into effect. And then he talked about, tens of billions of dollars in spending and try to shore up businesses. It's kind of vague. It's not exactly clear what that could be. Are you at least liking the sound of that message from at least Premier Ford, that he sounds willing to turn on the spending taps to try to help?
Look, the last thing we need in ordinary times is more government spending. That's why we have giant deficits both at the provincial and the federal level. But we are going to need to help businesses that may be sideswiped by tariffs. Not just businesses, but also average Canadians, too. One of the things that our data is showing is that if tariffs come to be, these 25% U.S. tariffs, and then Canada retaliates with tariffs of our own, 2/3 of our members, small business owners, said that they're going to be forced to increase prices. And that's a big worry. It's, the U.S. tariffs would be bad enough, but retaliatory tariffs from Canada, it would impose higher prices on every U.S. good that is sold in Canada, depending on how it's structured. We can't afford it. We've just wrestled inflation down. Now to go back to that, gosh, there's no good or easy answers here.
No kidding. And Dan, speaking of answers, we talked to you a lot over the last several years during the pandemic about the struggles that small business and, CFIB members were facing here. You're just coming out of this pandemic, now being faced by this. What's the sort of mood and vibe you're picking up from your members?
Look, Canadian small businesses are desperately weakened and have been for some time. The average small firm still has on its books about $100,000 in post-COVID debt that they've been trying to get rid of. There have been, glimmers of hope on the economic tunnel time and time again, only to be snatched away by domestic issues. And that's why we need to make sure that we are serious, not just about getting this tariff issue with the U.S. behind us, but also, returning to focus on how do we grow the economy, free up small businesses to do what they do best, and that is create jobs and economic growth for all of us Canadians.
And Dan, Beyond Advocacy like this, I hear your voice on radio, I see you on TV as well. Have you actually spoken to any government officials, be it at the federal or provincial level, and been able to send them a message? And do you feel they are receptive to what you're saying?
Look, they're listening for sure, but it's action that is needed, and I'm not seeing the degree of action that I certainly did see. I think in the last round of negotiations between Canada and the U.S. It feels like this issue, because of the political cloud that is over the country as a whole, this issue has seemed to have fallen down the priority list, and we can't afford for that to happen. So I'm glad that there is some action happening today, and I don't underestimate the challenge. This is not easy for any government, let alone a government that is in tatters right now, to try to sort out.
It's complicated timing indeed. Okay, appreciate your time this morning. Dan Kelly, CEO of the Canadian Federation of Independent Business. Thanks for sharing the time. Appreciate this.